How do the Texans look right now?
Like the worst franchise in football. The worst. Number one worst in football. I don't even have to go into how great Deshaun Watson is. As a player, Mike Greenberg did something which he then tweeted out, which I suggest go follow Greeny on Twitter and look at what, because he broke down statistically what Deshaun just did this past season. With only 3 other quarterbacks in the history of the game have ever done it. He was so great, and the Texans' defense was so bad. And they got rid of his boy and one of the best receivers in the game with maybe arguably the best set of hands of all time, certainly on a very short list. Larry Fitzgerald, a couple other guys in DeAndre Hopkins. This organization did that without telling them? Could you imagine Joe Montana in his prime? They call him into the office. Yeah, Joe, they don't know. He's watching SportsCenter and he finds out they traded Jerry Rice. It would never happen, right? The disrespect that they've shown Deshaun Watson. They hire a firm for hundreds of thousands of dollars to go on a search for a front office, for a coach, and they come back and suddenly the owner decides 11th hour, no, I'm just going to hire this other guy. Deshaun said, would you just listen to me? I'd like to give some input. You don't have to take it. I'd like to have some input. They say, no, don't worry about that. Do you understand they've so alienated Deshaun Watson, who is, by all accounts, including our own experiences talking to him, the leader you want? He has that magic pixie dust that sprinkles it on everything. Everyone believes they can win in college, in the pros. He is exactly the kind of leader you want on the team. You understand? You've alienated him to the. Let's say you could trade Deshaun Watson and get a haul of picks and do everything you wanted to do. You know what the whole point would be? To one day, maybe your franchise could acquire a player almost as good as Deshaun Watson, who you had on your team. And trust me, he won't be on the team for long. No one's going to want these Texans jobs now. No one's going to want to work for the Houston Texans after how they just botched this situation with Deshaun Watson. They look like the worst franchise in football.
I don't disagree with you, but I want to take it a step further, and I'll ultimately admit that, this is just my feeling, and this is not about First Take. This is not about anybody else, because it's going to be relatively controversial, but I'm going to say the damn thing anyway. Because the reality of the situation is that sometimes, even though we're incredibly hesitant to attach guilt by association, we have to take into account certain situations. Think about the times that we're living in, social justice issues and things of that nature. Think about what their dad, God rest his soul, Bob McNair's position was, running this franchise as owner of the Houston Texans. He was not somebody that was considered relatively sensitive to those things. Remember that prior to George Floyd's killing, even a year or two earlier, there was some beef involving DeAndre Hopkins. And even though I took the position that, you got a contract, you got to go to work. You can't, if everything was contingent on liking what your boss had to say, most of us wouldn't have jobs. You can't allow that to prevent you from going to work. Nevertheless, he had offended DeAndre Hopkins because of sentiments that he possessed and he expressed that, the inmates running the asylum or something like that, if I remember correctly. He used something along those lines, and DeAndre Hopkins had gotten offended by that. I'm bringing all of this up to say the McNairs are who still run the Texans. And so when you take it into that realm, they gave Deshaun Watson his money. Yes, he was tearful in his gratitude and appreciation when he had the press conference, thanking them for the faith that they showed in him. So why would Deshaun Watson do an about face? There's only one logical explanation. And you can point to Deshaun, to them trading DeAndre Hopkins. You can point to a few things that he did not like. But ultimately, if you talk to Dabo Swinney, his coach at Clemson, if you talk to teammates and friends of Deshaun Watson, people who know him, that's not who he is. He's a real dude. What would the about face entail? How do you go from crying with gratitude for them paying you to switching around and saying, I want out of there? There can only be one thing, and that is whatever you did after you gave him the money alienated him, which means you basically told them, we gave you the money, now shut the hell up, go play, and we'll do this. And that is the one thing that could have offended him to the point that he's so offended by that he has done an
Shut the hell up and go play with no one. Go play with no one. Without a defense, without an offense, just go play by yourself.
That's what they did to him, and he was like, yo, this is not what this was supposed to be about. That's the only reason Deshaun Watson would act like this, where he's like, I don't want to have anything to do with y'all.
Yeah, look, the question that was posed is how do the Texans look in this situation? Terrible. But they've looked terrible before, to your point, Stephen A., with the late owner. They've looked terrible before, to your point, Max, with trading DeAndre Hopkins, with a young quarterback that's in his prime. I remember all of us sat on this show and went crazy about that particular situation. But this is how it was explained to me about Deshaun Watson from someone. They disenfranchised their franchise throughout this process. Had nothing to do with the contract. And I'm so glad you said that, Stephen A., because I don't know one football player in the NFL, if you put $170 million in front of their face, they're not going to take it, or 150, whatever it is. But that doesn't mean there aren't underlying issues with what's going on. And now it's come to a head because of this particular situation. But this is not the first incident, obviously, with the Houston Texans. Here's my problem. Here's my problem with the whole thing. When you look at all of these teams that we see in the playoffs or we saw in the playoffs, and you think about their quarterbacks, and you think about the impact that the quarterbacks have on the roster. I think about when Stephen A. talks about Aaron Rodgers being a bad man and all of that stuff. And I think about the whole thought process when they drafted Jordan Love and how everybody was talking about, oh, this is the worst thing and the Packers have done a disservice and all of that. Come to find out, Aaron Rodgers and LaFleur have had a pretty good situation. They've been in contact with each other. They've talked. He's expressed the things that he's needed to see as far as the Green Bay Packers. Deshaun Watson is the only light in Houston.